Good morning. Welcome to the circle that gathers us this morning. A circle that is for us a safe container for our grief and our gladness. A safe container for the diversity of our experiences and our cultures and our ways of making meaning, our ways of understanding the world, our languages and ethnicities and our sexual orientation and gender identities, our ages and stages of life. And as we gather in this place, we gather on storied land, ancient land of our Indigenous peoples, traditional meeting and gathering place, traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, Nakota Sioux peoples. A generous land that has welcomed newcomers for generations. And as those of us who find home in this land, as members of Treaty 6, we gather with each other this day to deepen our commitment to mutuality and to reconciliation. And we come singing our gratitude for life and for those with whom we've been privileged to share it.
We light this candle this morning because our gathering needs the light of community. We also light this candle because our lives need the light of spirit, need the light of what bonds us together in wisdom, in awareness, in our humanity. We light this candle because of all the places of need in our lives and in the world. Because of places like Myanmar, Manus Island, and New York, and all that are in need. We light this candle because there are those who walk in the shadowy path of grief and loss. And we light this candle because we celebrate that within us burns a bright light. A light that glows, the light of healing, the light of friendship, and the light of compassion. And so in the light that glows in the midst of us this morning, may we find that it burns brightly in our lives. As we share words together this morning that center us, may you respond to the phrases with the words you see before us. Into this place we gather, listening beyond words, for the rhythm of all that is sacred. We gather seeking solace for losses that are heavy to bear. We gather to share the things that our lives have found to be true. We gather to forgive, freeing each other into hope and renewal. We gather to stand shoulder to shoulder. No one stand alone. Into this place we come. Grateful for the gift of life, mindful of the spirit of death, and seeking to be inspired to live fully in this time that is now. We strengthen our intentions as we pray. We open now to sacred mysteries beyond our capacity to name, but within our experience to know. We open the holy oneness to which we belong, to our deep connection with Spirit, with each other, with earth and all creation. We come seeking to dismantle the fears that isolate and divide, to shrink our arrogance and stretch our compassion, to open our eyes, unclench our fists, unstop our ears, and let love have its way in us. And so we pray. Amen. Now is a time for all of us and any who wish to come to the carpet, those who are small or who want to come and be part of this group may come. This is our time for all ages. And this morning, we are going to have a time with our friend Sherry Ann. And I'm always excited about that because it means that Sherry Ann is going to teach us a way to not just say things and sing things with our mouths, but to also say them and sing them with our whole bodies. So Sherry Ann is going to teach us some signs to a song that we might do together. And this song, it's called Just to Be, is a blessing. Sometimes it's very easy for us all to think that we have to do things to be important, or that we have to do really well. We have to do all the jobs we have perfectly, or that we just have to perform things just as good as we can. But do you know what? One of the things that is so important to know is that just by being you, just by being me, that's all we need to do. Just by being is the biggest blessing of all. That's the greatest thing. So the fact that you can be you and you're here today is fantastic. And that goes for all of us. We're here. It's just us. We all make mistakes and we all do great things. And sometimes we do them all in the same day. But it doesn't matter because we're here and we're us. And that's what's important. So Sherry Ann, this wonderful song, could you teach us some signs for it? And should I hold this for you?
Yes, thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. The first, we're going to just walk through or find our way through the signs before we sing the song. So I'd like to invite you to raise number 1. That's like number 1 in American Sign Language. And for the beginning of the song, it starts off with the English word just. And so we're going to put that one up there, and we're going to turn our wrist, turn your hand around. That's the beginning. Just. To be, just like Chris said, be. We're going to use the letter B in American Sign Language, which is putting your hand up in the air and folding your thumb over in front of your palm. That's a beautiful B, okay. And we're going to put it at our chin and send it out into the world, just to be. It's a blessing to be. So this sign, we put our 2 hands together in front of our chins, yeah, and then send out that beautiful, good energy blessing. And then this song also talks about living. And so we're going to take the letter L, which is stretching your thumb and your finger out, and create 2 letter L's. Good, that's great. And then put them right down in front of your body and pull them up and like you're breathing in, like you're alive. Yeah. Great. Let's see. Oh, that's holy. We need the sign for holy. And we're going to use the letter H. So imagine putting your 2 first fingers together, turning them on your side, stretching your thumb out, and you've got the letter H. And then we stretch that out across our hand like that, and it becomes holy. Have we done all the signs, Chris?
That's it.
Oh, there we go.
That's it.
Let's sing.
We did it.
This morning I want to share with you some thoughts that come from a book that just came out this summer called Option B. Its subtitle is Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy. It's written by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. And I want to read from the introduction of the book some of the story that led Sheryl Sandberg, her own personal story, to write this book. "11 years after our wedding, Dave and I went to Mexico to celebrate our friend Phil's 50th birthday. My parents were babysitting our son and daughter in California, and Dave and I were excited to have an adult-only weekend. Friday afternoon, we were hanging out by the pool, playing a game called Settlers on Catan with our iPads, and for a refreshing change, I was actually winning. But my eyes kept drifting closed, and once I realized that fatigue was going to prevent me from securing victory, I said, 'I'm falling asleep,' and I gave in and curled up. At 3:41 in the afternoon, someone snapped a picture of Dave holding his iPad, sitting next to his brother Rob and his brother and our friend Phil. I'm asleep on the cushion on the floor in front of them, and Dave is smiling. When I woke up an hour later, Dave was no longer in that chair. I joined our friends for a swim, assuming he'd gone to the gym as he planned, and when I came back to our room to shower and he wasn't there, I was surprised, but not concerned. I got dressed for dinner, checked my email, called our children. Our son was upset because he and his friend had ignored playground rules, climbed a fence, and ripped their sneakers. Through tears, he came clean, and I told him that his honesty and that I appreciated his honesty, and that Daddy and I would discuss how much he would have to chip in from his allowance for a new pair. Not wanting to live with that uncertainty, our fourth grader pushed me to decide. I told him this was the kind of decision that Daddy and I made together, so I'd have to get back to him the next day. I left the room and went downstairs, and Dave wasn't there. I walked out to the beach and joined the rest of our group, and when he wasn't there either, I felt a wave of panic. We found Dave on the floor, lying by the elliptical machine in the gym, his face slightly blue and turned to the left, a small pool of blood under his head, and we all screamed. I started CPR, Rob took over for me, a doctor came and took over for him. The ride in the ambulance was the longest 30 minutes of my life. Dave on a stretcher in the back, the doctor working over him, me in the front seat where they made me sit, crying and pleading with the doctor to tell me that Dave was still alive. I couldn't believe how far the hospital was and how few cars moved out of the way. We finally arrived and they carried him behind a heavy wooden door, refusing to let me through. I sat on the floor with Marnie, Phil's wife, one of my closest friends, holding me. After what felt like forever, I was led into a small room. The doctor came in and sat behind his desk, and I knew what that meant. When the doctor left, a friend of Phil's came over, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "I'm sorry for your loss." The words in that obligatory kiss felt like a flash forward. I knew I was experiencing something that was going to happen over and over and over. And so began the rest of my life. It was, and still is, a life I would never have chosen, a life I was completely unprepared for, the unimaginable. I'm only partway through my own journey. Though the fog of acute grief has lifted, the sadness and the longing for Dave remain. I'm still finding my way and learning many of the lessons I've written about in this book. Like so many who've experienced tragedy, I hope I can choose meaning and even joy and help others do the same. As I look back now over the darkest moments, I can see that there were even then signs of hope. A friend reminded me that when my children broke down at the cemetery, I said to them, "This is the second worst moment in our lives. We lived through the first, and we'll live through this. It can only get better from here." I started singing a song I knew from childhood, Oshe Salom, a prayer for peace. I don't remember deciding to sing or how I picked this song. I later learned it was the last line of the Kaddish, the Jewish prayer for mourning, which might explain why it just poured out of me. Soon all the adults joined in and the children followed and the wailing stopped. Just weeks after Dave's death, I was talking to our friend Phil about a father-child activity. We came up with a plan for someone to fill in for Dave. But I cried to Phil, "But I want Dave." And he put his arm around me and he said, "Option A is not available. So let's just kick the proverbial you-know-what out of option B." Life is never perfect. We all live some form of option B. These are insights from a journey through grief.
Christian scriptures give us many stories of the resilience of Jesus' community in the decades following his execution. This story comes to us in a collection of writings composed 60 years or more after the death of Jesus and addressed to a persecuted community within Roman-occupied Palestine. It offered the hope that the memory of their leader might still inspire a sense of his presence with them. This paraphrase of a story that ends the fourth gospel is written by John Pentland from Hillhurst United in Calgary. Simon Peter said to the other disciples, "I'm going fishing." His companions replied, "We'll go with you." They all got in the boat, paddled out a ways, but all that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, a voice called to them from shore. "Caught anything yet?" The worst words to say to people who are fishing. They called back, "No, no minnows, no old rubber tires, not a thing." The voice from shore said, "Try casting your net on the other side of the boat. Maybe you'll find what you're looking for." The disciples looked at each other, muttering about, but not knowing, who does that fellow think he is? Still having no better ideas, and being a little curious too, they shrugged, and over the other side went the nets. Suddenly, the boat tilted, the nets sagged. One or two of the fisher people leaned gingerly over the side to see what was happening. "You're not going to believe this," one shouted. "These nets are packed full." They drew the heavy nets in, everyone working together. The one with the calculator stood aside and counted. 153 fish, he proclaimed when they were done. They looked at each other, shaking their heads in amazement. 153 was the number of all the kinds of fish in the sea, and it seems they'd caught one of each. "And the nets aren't damaged," one of them noted quietly. It was all some kind of miracle, they agreed, and a strange one at that. Together, they turned to see what the person it was who stood on the shore and advised them, but in the early morning mist, the shore was as if empty. This is a story told to an early Jewish Christian community and passed down to us in writings from the early Jesus tradition.
Life is never perfect. We all live some form of option B. It was that sentence that sold me this book. And it was Sheryl Sandberg's story of living into her grief that made me read this book. And even though life has some very near perfect moments, for many of us, I think the truth of our experience is that we all know something about living option B. Whether we had to leave the country of our origin, start over in a different culture and climate, whether we've had the experience of losing our marriage, or our job, or our crops, or the experience of losing our health or some threat to our health, or losing some capacity, experiencing the death of someone we love, some unwelcome end or estrangement to a relationship, the heartbreaking realities we face in living and loving. Whatever the transitions or tragedies or traumas, whether we've experienced the natural end of a lifetime or a senseless and violent act that abbreviates a lifetime, losses great and small, losses we anticipate, losses we could never have imagined, losses that come to us along the way. We all know something about losing option A. Many know what it is to be born into option B without the advantages and privileges of an option A life. We all know something about losing our first choice or being rerouted onto a different path. And we found ourselves on journeys to adapt and embrace option B, to ring whatever possibilities are hidden within the path we'd never chosen to choose. We find ourselves in lives that seek to make the most out of the option that has chosen us, or somehow it's the one we've got. So learning how to live option B well seems essential because it is inevitable. Maybe that's why Christopher Robin gave Pooh that great piece of advice when he said, "Promise me you'll always remember you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think." It's wisdom we all need for our living. And we're also possessed of a resilience we didn't know we had. The early days of option B are days when our shock absorbers are overloaded with the reality that somehow that truly unwelcome has landed on us, or that uninvited change has happened and it's happened to us. We know the experience when that sheer exhaustion comes on us, when the adrenaline has run out and the grief just pours in, and it seems to take more energy than we can muster just to even breathe. We feel like we're in the dentist chair wearing that leaden blanket that holds us down during an X-ray, that leaden blanket of sadness that covers us, making everything an unimaginable effort. Even the simple pleasures in life bring no relief. Something feels amputated, as though a part of us is gone. And the stump that remains alternates between numbness and incredible pain. We know there are no detours around grief. There's no going back, there's only going forward. And everyone's timetable is different. But somehow, there comes a moment when the prison door opens on our traumatized lives and we take a step. It might even be that we're not conscious of taking it at the time, but looking back, we realize that in a particular moment, we took a step that was our first step to embrace option B, to begin a journey back to life. It was in just such a moment, in the world of that ancient story, that Jesus' friend Peter said simply but decisively, "I'm going fishing." To do something we've always done as a way of remembering who we are. To step into our place again in the circles of our lives, to take up something we love or something we always wanted to do, to reconnect with our sense of purpose, somehow without even realizing it, is to take a step forward. For that character Peter, in his identity within the ancient world of the story, fishing was a way of taking a step forward in his shattered universe. It was his first step in option B, in getting on with life after the death of someone he deeply loved. Like so many of us, Peter sought serenity in the midst of his grief by resuming a routine, the one he knew best. He went back to work. He went back to the lake where he first met his friend and teacher, the one whose violent death he was grieving. He went back to the place where he was forever changed by the one he lost. And in the world of the story, his friends do the right thing. They say, Peter, wait, we'll go with you. We need those people who will go with us. Those people who will do nothing more than be with us. Who won't say, I know just how you feel. You'll get over it. Time heals all wounds. Everything happens for a reason. We need those people who won't make themselves feel better by minimizing our loss or cheering us on with platitudes. We need those people who will offer nothing more than the comfort of their companionship as we try to navigate and row our boat through option B. And according to the story, it wasn't really an illustrious first step. It was kind of disastrous. Those interminable hours of that night are summed up in 5 devastating words. That night, they caught nothing. Zilch, nothing. There's no guarantee that our first attempts at rebuilding our shattered lives are going to be successful. Because our resolve to get on with life isn't necessarily enough. But what's important is however disastrous their effort, they had begun. The dawn had arrived on the morning of the next chapter of life, where they began bouncing forward, not bouncing back. The way the story tells it, as the day was breaking, someone stood on the beach. In the early dawn of our resilience, we perceive the world through the haze of our grief. And we don't necessarily recognize the presence and the persistence of wisdom that meets us on the shore between our hurt and our healing. We only see a friend who invites us for lunch, or a voice at the other end of the telephone asking how we're doing. Or we see the other who's hurting too. In that daybreak, in our resilience, everything is hidden in the midst of so many conflicting emotions. There's a universal experience expressed when the story says the disciples didn't recognize this presence. And from those shadows on the shore, a voice says, "Caught anything yet?" Try putting your net on the other side of the boat. Try something different. Try the other side. Try again. Try doing it differently. Keep trying. Give it time. Be patient with yourself. Give option B your best shot. And in the compactness of this narrative, option B, aka the other side of the boat, option B opens its gifts and fills their nets. We know in real time that our empty nets don't fill up magically or instantly. But yet somehow, new mornings do come. And friends do get in the boat with us. And wisdom does meet us in many forms. And resilience does find us. Moment after moment, day after day, month after month, year after year, we discover the courage and the capacity to live option B and accept its beauties and its blessings. Would we trade all our post-traumatic growth to have option A back again? Of course we would. Sure we would. But since that choice isn't available, and because we are braver than we believe and stronger than we seem and smarter than we thought and more resilient than we knew, we begin to make the most of option B. The enduring wisdom in this ancient story of a fishing expedition is a testament to our capacity for resilience. This isn't a ghost story about a dead man walking again, or a historical record of the words and deeds of a first century prophet. This is a story that is the product of an option B. Had the family and friends of Jesus of Nazareth not found that they were braver than they believed and stronger than they seemed and smarter than they knew, the teachings of their peasant rabbi would have died with him. And the spiritual community that they created, rooted in his teachings, a spiritual community of radical inclusion, would have been lost to us and to all the generations that followed them. But this story and so many others that have been passed down to us come out of the work of grief and loss. Though the empire had killed their teacher, by their capacity to embrace option B, the empire had no capacity to kill their community, the spiritual community they were building with one another. On this day that follows All Hallows Eve and All Souls Day and Day of the Dead, we come to remember those whose lives have touched ours deeply, those who have gone before us into death, those who have touched our lives in their living, in chapters of our lives. And so we take this time to consider how it is that we continue to transform option B into beauty and blessing.